Welcome. It was a chilly fall day and I was in the mood to bake. So I tried a couple of new recipes and I also made a recipe that I had tried before and wanted to change a few things on it. And I thought I would share a little bit of the process where I got the recipes to give you a little bit of encouragement to try something different in your kitchen. I made some pumpkin muffins last week and they were really good, but I wanted to try just a simple pumpkin muffin recipe. So I went to Sally's Baking Addiction. That is my go-to website whenever I want to bake. Every recipe that I have made from there turns out really good. So I found this recipe and I had everything. So we're just starting off with our dry ingredients. So 1 3/4 cups all-purpose flour, a teaspoon of baking soda, 1½ teaspoons of ground cinnamon, 1½ teaspoons of pumpkin pie spice, 1/4 teaspoon of ground ginger, and then 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And I just wanted to get this all mixed up, and I wanted to make sure that it was mixed up very well because I didn't want to have like a big bunch of spices all together. In a separate bowl, I'm mixing up the rest of the ingredients to come up with a wet mixture. So it is starting off with 1½ cups of canned pumpkin puree, and it does call for 1/2 cup of granulated sugar and 1/2 cup of packed light or dark brown sugar. I think there was a few comments that said it was a little bit too sweet, so you can use your own judgment and use less sugar or use all of the brown sugar. I find brown sugar is nicer in some recipes. I'm also adding in 1/2 cup of vegetable oil, 2 large eggs, and then it says 1/4 cup of milk, dairy or non-dairy. I'm just using a skim milk. So we are going to get this all mixed up really good. I just want to make sure all of the eggs are whisked up really good. And that was one of the things I liked about this recipe. It was pretty simple ingredients and I could do everything by hand. So we're just going to take the dry mixture and then add in the wet mixture and just mix it up really good. And you just want to make sure that there's no more flour pockets because that's one of the things that can happen. But I also know with muffins, they also say not to overmix. So I'm just using my spatula, gently folding it, and then I just kind of scrape the bottom and I can see a little flour pocket here and there. So I just want to make sure that those are all mixed up really good. My oven is preheating to 425 degrees. I sprayed my 12 count muffin pan and then I'm just using 1/4 cup to measure them all out. Some of them are a little bit bigger than others. And then after the 5 minutes, you put the heat down to 350 and then bake them for another 16 to 17 minutes. I did that. I turned off the oven and then I usually let them sit for another 2 minutes. I was very happy with the way that they plumped up. Some of them were a little bit bigger than others and these were delicious, especially with a pumpkin spice coffee. They had a nice texture to them. They were very moist and they hold up good. You just put them in a bowl or in a container with a lid and they are good out on the counter for up to 5 days. And these were really enjoyed by my family and I will definitely make them again. And you can also add in some chocolate chips if you want to. The next recipe is Copycat Red Lobster Cheddar Bay Biscuits. This is about the 5th time that I've made it. And I wanted something quick to go along with some soup, and I will link the recipe down below. It is from Budget Bites. I have had a lot of luck with some of their recipes over the years, so all of the recipes will be linked down below, and we're just making the mixture for the biscuits. So it's 2 cups of all-purpose flour, a tablespoon of baking powder, a teaspoon of sugar, 1/2 teaspoon of garlic powder. I put a little bit more, probably about a teaspoon total of garlic powder, 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda, and then 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And then you're going to take 1/3 cup of cold butter, and then you're just going to take your pastry cutter or fork, and then you're going to work it until it is crumbly, and the butter pieces are about the size of peas. Honestly, this is the hardest part about the biscuits, and I also have the oven preheating to 400 degrees. So I just need to get this butter all worked in, and then we add in the rest of the ingredients. After a few minutes, the butter was broken down and I'm just adding in 3/4 cup of shredded cheddar cheese and then 1 cup of milk. And it does say more if needed. I did add another little splash just because I found like all of the flour wasn't mixing in properly. And then once I did that, it all came together very easily. And the reason why I made this recipe quite a few years ago is because I would always pick up a box of the Cheddar Bay biscuit mix at Walmart, and one night I didn't have it. I quickly went to Google, found this recipe, and like I said, I've made it 4 or 5 times. I've been very happy with it. I just have some parchment paper on a baking sheet, and then I'm just dropping them by the heaping spoonful. Now the serving size says 12 biscuits. That is what I would recommend because they bake in the 15 minutes. In the past, I've made them bigger and then they take longer to bake. So if your main is ready at a certain time, just be very mindful of that. You can make the biscuits bigger, but they do take a little bit longer to bake. So I had to move them around here because I really wasn't sure if I was going to have the 12 biscuits, but I did. And then all you do is put them into the oven. It says 12 to 15 minutes, but I found 15 minutes were perfect for mine. And then while they're baking, you go ahead and make the garlic batter. Now this is one thing I tried to make different this time, and I'm gonna tell you the truth about it because I found in the past like the garlic butter was just missing a little bit of something, and all it really needed was to add a little bit more garlic powder. So it calls for half a teaspoon of garlic powder. I upped it to a full teaspoon of garlic powder, and then you use a teaspoon of dried parsley and then a quarter of a cup of melted butter. It called for Italian seasoning. It said optional. I never used it before, so this time I decided to add another quarter of a teaspoon of basil and a quarter teaspoon of oregano. And I'm just heating up the soup. I made it a couple of nights before. It was really good. It heated up great. I will link that video down below. And then this is when I'm like, uh-oh, a little bit too much herb. So what I would do for the garlic butter is I would recommend a third of a cup of melted butter with a teaspoon of dried parsley and then the full teaspoon of garlic powder. I find sometimes there's not quite enough butter, and then the garlic just gives it that little bit of extra tang. So I'm just keeping with it because I got to get everything put together, and it turned out good. It's just not as beautiful looking as it usually is because I have all of the globs of the herbs, but you still have the melted butter with the garlic, and it turned out really good. So it was just my husband and I eating the soup for dinner. Our son had leftovers, so he didn't really need a biscuit because it was already hearty. So we only ate 2 biscuits for dinner, but this turned out great. They were perfect for breaking up and dipping in the nice flavorful broth. And all I do is I either put them into a Ziploc bag or an airtight container. I put them in the fridge. I heat them up in the air fryer because they kind of crisp up a little bit. I actually find they're really good leftover. I haven't frozen them, but I think that you would be able to, but I recommend the air fryer. I think the microwave would work, but they might not be as crispy. So anyways, we had lots of leftovers, and I am going to try making a smaller batch. But if you do try these, comment down below to let you know how they turned out. I thought they were really easy and very similar to the pre-box mix. We are ending with something sweet. I was looking for a recipe for brownies. Went to allrecipes.com to find a really simple recipe with amazing reviews. I'm just doing it all in my pan. So you have a half a cup of butter melted, sugar, eggs, vanilla extract. You just mix this all together, and then you add in your dry ingredients, cocoa powder, all-purpose flour, some salt, and baking powder, and then you just really got to mix it all up. And I love that everything was made in the pot. And that's one of the things I like when you're baking is just really simple ingredients that you have in your pantry. You don't need all of these different mixers and everything. And everything I made this day was really simple. And I don't think you can get any easier than this. The oven is preheating to 350 degrees. And then I'm just taking my square pan. I sprayed it. I'm just putting this all in here, and then I just bake it in the oven. And in the past, I would have all of these little mixes in my pantry, but I just find the prices are getting more and more expensive, and it really brings up your grocery bill. So that's one of the reasons why I've really been trying to make more from scratch. Now, I did do this for 35 minutes. I would recommend 40. Now, I just had a store brand cocoa, so it wasn't as dark as I thought it was going to be. But there was a frosting, and I'm going to make that now. So it did say 3 tablespoons of butter softened. I should have just melted it all together. Then you just use your cocoa powder, vanilla extract, and then a cup of confectioner's sugar. And then it did call for a tablespoon of honey. I didn't add it. I didn't have any. I didn't want to do maple syrup because I didn't want to have like that maple flavor. So I just added a little bit of milk, and I found because the butter was softened and not melted, I had to add a little bit more milk just to make sure that everything was mixed up. But honestly, this was like the perfect amount of frosting. And once again, in the past, all of these little frosting and cake mixes would go on for 99 cents. This was a long time ago, like when my kids were younger. And this just came together really easy with all of the ingredients that I had. And it was just the perfect amount of frosting, and then the frosting gave it more of that chocolate appearance, like more indulgent. I'm going to be honest with you, I really wasn't sure if this was going to be any good because I found like it was very light, and I should have baked it a little bit longer, and I had sprinkles to use up, and that was something we always did for Halloween, was just make brownies and put some sprinkles on it. I kind of overdid it with the sprinkles because it was a shaker I ran out, and then pink sugar was coming out. But I was just trying to clean up some of these things that I had in my pantry. And there is the frosting. It definitely made it look a lot prettier with it. I don't think you needed it, but if you were going to serve them to someone else, definitely put the frosting on. Now the serving size said 16, so I just cut them 4 by 4. They popped out really easily. I baked them for 35 minutes. I would say a little bit longer because the middle was a little bit gooey, like most brownies. But these were so good. They exceeded my expectation, and the fact that everything is made in the pot is just icing on the brownie because it was really simple. And a little feedback about the muffins. I found they were very similar to the Krusties, like the baking mixes. They kind of had the same texture and flavor, kind of moist, a little bit of, like they were a little bit more dense, but they were really good. Perfect with a cup of coffee. They stayed fresh for a few days. I just kept them in a Pyrex bowl with the lid on, and I will make these again. So I hope that you enjoyed these recipes. It's just something I'm trying to do differently because I would pick these little things up when I would get my groceries, but I just find like prices are getting more and more expensive. So I'm trying to do a little bit more from scratch, but also keep it really easy. So if you enjoyed this video, like, comment, subscribe if you're new, and I'll keep sharing more of these simple little recipes with all of you.